On February 18, 1930, Pluto is discovered at Lowell Observatory in Flagstaff, Arizona.
But why don't scientists consider Pluto a planet anymore? And why is Pluto sometimes called America's planet? Also, why was it given the name Pluto? Additionally, what can you see when you visit the Flagstaff area today?
It all began with Percival Lowell, a well-traveled businessman, mathematician, and diplomat from an elite Boston family who, at age 39, decided to dedicate himself to astronomy. With the help of MIT graduate William Henry Pickering, Lowell built an observatory in Flagstaff, Arizona in 1894, 18 years before it became the 48th U.S. state. Lowell theorized that wobbles observed in the orbits of Uranus and Neptune were caused by a ninth planet. He calculated its approximate location, but died in 1916 after a 10-year effort to prove its existence. The search resumed at the Lowell Observatory 13 years later in 1929. Using Lowell's calculations and the guidance of the 72-year-old Pickering, 24-year-old astronomer Clyde Tombaugh discovered the tiny distant planet in 1930. It was the first planet discovered since Neptune 84 years earlier, and the only one discovered by scientists in the US. Tombaugh did this by using the observatory's astrograph, a special telescope for taking photos. He took photographs of the same section of sky several nights apart. He then used a blink comparator to shift rapidly between the photographic plates of the two images. Distant objects like stars remained stationary, but Pluto, because it is a much closer moving body, jumped from one position to another in the two photographs. Tombaugh's finding was confirmed by other astronomers and announced to the world as the ninth planet in our solar system on March 13, 1930, which would have been Percival Lowell's 75th birthday. The following day in England, 11-year-old Venetia Burney was having breakfast with her grandfather. He was reading the newspaper and informed her that a ninth planet had been discovered. Young Venetia suggested the name Pluto for this new planet. She was familiar with mythology and noted that Pluto, the Roman god of the underworld, had not yet been used for a celestial body. Her grandfather was Falconer Madan. Besides having a great name, he just happened to be an Oxford University librarian. Grandpa Falconer mentioned the name Pluto to an Oxford astronomy professor, who, in turn, cabled Lowell Observatory with the suggestion. Back in Arizona, Tombaugh and his colleagues had thrown around a lot of ideas, but had not considered the name Pluto until that cable arrived from England. They loved the name. One clear reason why was that it maintained the consistency of planet names from Roman mythology. Pluto in particular worked well because it made sense for such a distant object to be connected with the god of the underworld. Another plus for the name Pluto was that its first two letters were the initials of the man who started it all, Percival Lowell. Let's get some of the basics on Pluto. Pluto's diameter is just 1,400 miles, which is about half the width of the continental United States. Pluto is 1/6 the size of Earth and just 2/3 the size of Earth's moon. Its mass is only 1/6 of the mass of Earth's moon. Earth is 92 million miles from the Sun. Pluto, however, is 3.6 billion miles away from the Sun. It also has 5 known moons, and its average temperature is a balmy minus 387 degrees Fahrenheit. In 2006, NASA's New Horizons probe was launched. In 2015, it passed by Pluto and sent back incredible photos that have greatly enhanced humanity's understanding of this distant celestial body. You have, in fact, seen several of those stunning images in this video. To the chagrin of many, in 2006, the same year New Horizons was launched, Pluto was reclassified as a dwarf planet. So how did Pluto lose its place among the now 8 planets? I'm no expert, but I'm going to try to explain it the best I can. The International Astronomical Union has 3 criteria for a celestial body to be considered a planet. First, it must orbit the Sun. No problem for Pluto there. Second, it must have sufficient mass to become nearly round. Pluto meets that criterion. Third, it must clear the neighborhood around its orbit. This is where Pluto runs into problems. Pluto's orbit has always been, well, weird compared to the other 8 planets. It is actually on a different plane than those 8. Pluto's orbit also crosses Neptune's. In fact, from 1979 to 1999, Pluto was actually closer to the Sun than Neptune was. In 1978, Pluto's moon Charon was discovered. It has a good name, by the way, since Charon was the figure in mythology who piloted the ferry boat across the river Styx into the underworld. Anyway, for people who understand math much better than I do, the discovery of Charon demonstrates that Pluto's gravitational influence on Uranus and Neptune is negligible. By the way, is it Uranus or Uranus? Either way, it's a great name. Anyway, Pluto's gravitational pull is not quite what Lowell had thought. In 1989, NASA's Voyager 2 space probe passed near Neptune. It enabled us to get a much more accurate assessment of Neptune's mass. This provided a better understanding of the perceived wobbles in Uranus and Neptune's orbits that had made Lowell hypothesize the existence of a 9th planet. But Lowell's calculations were based on this erroneous value for Neptune's mass. Once Voyager 2 gave us this more accurate value, the discrepancies disappeared, which means those perceived wobbles weren't really wobbles at all. So Lowell's theory that led to Pluto's discovery turned out to be wrong. I guess what's amazing in all of this is that there was still a planet, well, a dwarf planet, more or less where Lowell thought there would be, even though the mathematics he was using to find it turned out to not be accurate. Anyway, the final nail in the coffin for Pluto's status was the 2005 discovery of the dwarf planet Eris. Eris is almost as large as Pluto and has a greater mass than Pluto. It is also in Pluto's neighborhood. Pluto, as it turns out, just doesn't have enough mass to clear its neighboring region of other objects. And thus, in 2006, Pluto was reclassified as a dwarf planet. Pluto does own the distinction of being the largest of the 5 officially recognized dwarf planets in our solar system, at least for now. It is, of course, possible that someone will discover another one that is larger than Pluto in the future. Was it the right move to demote Pluto? Well, as a proud resident of Arizona, I'm a little hurt by it. But, smarter people than I am made these decisions, so I guess I will reluctantly somewhat agree with them. I guess. Venetia Burney, the little girl that gave Pluto its name, died in 2009 at age 90. I could not find any public statements indicating how she felt about the reclassification of Pluto as a dwarf planet, although we can probably guess.
Mrs. Lewis and I visited Flagstaff over Labor Day weekend in 2025. Located 7,000 feet above sea level in the San Francisco mountains, the city was a major stop-off on historic Route 66. We enjoyed a free self-guided walking tour that began at the historic railroad station and helped us better understand the history of the area. During our stay in Flagstaff, we made the short drive to Sunset Crater, which erupted back in the 11th century. A visitor center provided an excellent overview of the crater's history. We loved seeing the lava flows and walking around the area with our dogs. It almost seemed like another planet. Maybe that's why NASA used it as a training area for astronauts as they prepared for the Apollo moon landings back in the 60s and 70s. Near the crater is Wupatki National Monument, where ancestral Native Americans built spectacular structures soon after the volcanic eruption that created Sunset Crater. The sites were inhabited until the middle of the 13th century. In addition to the stunning ruins, The visitor center helped us better understand Wupatki's history. We also made the 1-hour drive from Flagstaff to Winslow, where we appreciated seeing Standin' on the Corner Park, which was inspired by the classic Eagles track, Take It Easy. Just outside of Winslow is Homology State Park, another site with impressive Native American ruins. These structures were built around the time Wupatki was abandoned in the middle of the 13th century. Sadly, much of the area was looted in the mid-20th century, leaving dig holes and pieces of broken pottery scattered around the site. The area became a state park in 1986, which has helped prevent further damage. A small visitor center gave insight to the location's history, including the looting. Within the park is the Sunset Cemetery, which was part of an early Mormon pioneer settlement established along the Little Colorado River in 1876, but abandoned 11 years later. Naturally, our trip to Flagstaff would not have been complete without a visit to Lowell Observatory, where Pluto was discovered nearly 100 years ago. It is located in a stunning setting amidst the pines in the mountains above the city. There is an overlook on the short drive up that affords an expansive view of the Flagstaff area. At the observatory, it was thrilling to stand in a place where such a significant scientific discovery was made. Our dogs enjoyed themselves as well.
Here are other events that happened today in history. In 1688, Quakers in Germantown, Pennsylvania filed the first formal protest against slavery in the colonies. In 1885, Mark Twain publishes The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, an American literary classic. In 1929, the World War I movie Wings wins the first ever Academy Award for Best Picture. In 1946, the U.S. Congress rescinds benefits promised to Filipinos who fought during World War II. In 1965, an Alabama state trooper shoots Jimmy Lee Jackson, triggering the Selma to Montgomery marches. In 2001, NASCAR driver Dale Earnhardt Sr. dies in a crash during the final lap of the Daytona 500. In 2023, the musical The Phantom of the Opera ends its record-setting 35-year run on Broadway.
And now it's time for our Today in History quiz. Who was the first modern European to propose that the Earth revolves around the sun? Galileo Galilei? Isaac Newton? Nicholas Copernicus? Or Johannes Kepler? Liked learning about Pluto and Flagstaff, Arizona? Then you'll love this one about the famous corner in Winslow, Arizona. Tap the screen to keep the story going on Today in History.